So we do like to save the best for last. So in our very first talk, Dr. Hussain mentioned conjunctival melanoma. So we've up until now we've been, all of our talks from patients who have had treatment have had uveal melanoma, and we're about to now be joined by a lovely lady called Lisa, who has conjunctival melanoma, and really pleased just that you're here with us today and can tell us a little bit about sort of yourself, what what experience you've had. So yeah, welcome. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thanks, Joe. I'm really pleased to be invited to Ocular. It's been such a big part of my life since I was diagnosed. So just to give you a little bit of background about me, I live in the north east of Scotland, and I'm treated in Glasgow, and I work in the health service, and I've worked throughout. So my treatment goes back to, and diagnosis goes back to 2016. But I think I probably had certainly something in my eye for a lot longer before that. And actually, looking back over old photographs, I've even noticed that my eye actually was quite red even back in about 2004. So what I had there may not have been cancer all that time, obviously, but certainly was there and present for quite a few years. And I guess for myself, my melanoma didn't really look like melanoma. It started off looking like a red dot in my eye. I just put it down to kind of like a broken blood vessel or something like that, and gradually it did change over time, but that change was so gradual and so slow. I didn't really bother too much about it, and I was regularly seen, because I wear glasses anyway, so I was regularly seen by opticians who similarly weren't really concerned either. And fast forward to probably just before my diagnosis, about the year before, I had noticed my eye was getting redder. And actually, looking back, I did have some floaters and things, but again, I just put that down to tiredness. There was never any pain, there was never any issue really. But I got a new job, and because I work in health as well, so so I met new people who weren't used to seeing me with, my eye just the way it was, who started to say to me, "What's wrong with your eye? What is that?" And I suppose at the time I began to get a bit more, I probably do need to check this out. And it was getting larger, and probably even from a vanity point of view, a bit more unsightly, really. It looked very much like a bubble on the white of my eye. There was kind of a big red blood vessel that linked to it, which I now know is a sign that, that's something more sinister. They do tend to have large feeder blood vessels when it's a cancer. And so anyway, I went to an optician, a different optician, who said, "Well, we don't think it's anything too serious, but we'll get you checked out." And I was sent to my local hospital. That referral took about 6 or 7 weeks, and they said, "Well, we don't really know what it is, but we'll refer you on." And then eventually, I was sent through to Glasgow.
Right. Okay.
And from there, I think things happened relatively quickly. The consultant, he did say to me, "Don't worry, this is just the lumps and bumps clinic." But I think he kind of realized what he was dealing with from straight away, really. And within 2 weeks, I think actually it was a week, actually, I was in having surgery from that appointment a week later. So, and I knew, because obviously I work in the health service, I thought that's not a good sign when things tend to move that quickly. But, I had, so it was a biopsy, and to obviously remove it. So surgery, I was just in overnight, met a lovely lady who actually was having her eye taken out at the age of 84. And, life continued as normal. I felt pretty well. I went to university on the Saturday. I was doing an OU course at the time. And it took a few weeks for the results to come back from my biopsy. So it was kind of in the back of my mind, but I wasn't too overly concerned. I kind of felt no news was bad news, but looking back, that was a bit naive, actually. I think conjunctival is quite difficult to diagnose, and I think they certainly sent it to another lab to check. Which was why it took a little bit of time. So when I went back in the middle of June, I was told that it was melanoma. And at that point, although the original incision had been done, and the kind of, it had grown into a nodule, that had been removed, I for the first time noticed that there was a ring of brown in my eye. It kind of bordered on the blue part of my eye. And it kind of hid in the darker edge of the blue of my eye as well. So I then had mitomycin drops. And that treatment involves kind of having drops for 2 weeks, having a rest in your eye for 2 weeks, a further 2 weeks, and it kind of took about 12 weeks, I think, in all to get through that.
Right.
And it was fine. It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't easy to administer. I found it quite difficult. The drops used to go down my nose and end up everywhere.
Right.
I didn't have too many problems with them though. And then that didn't really work for me though. And fast forward a little bit of time, I had a new consultant came into Glasgow, and they still hadn't really got control of the melanoma in my eye. There's still obviously some there. And by the February, we were kind of deciding what to do about that. And I ended up having a procedure called chirotherapy in the April, which really kind of, I think it's an alcohol freezing treatment, I think, and it got rid of all the
Okay.
brown out of my eye. At the same time as having that, I had a sentinel lymph node biopsy, and that was probably one of the bigger deals I went through actually. So that was done at the same time as my eye surgery, and that involves the day before they injected the blue dye into my eye, and that maps to see if the cancer's spread anywhere, and then they took some lymph nodes out of my neck. So that was an interesting time. That was quite, as I say, quite a big deal, and I think it was the first time they'd done that procedure as well. In Glasgow, but I was looked after fantastically. I mean, it was brilliant all the way through. And I did bounce back really quickly. I was meant to be in hospital for a couple of days, but I was doing so well. I was out by 2 days, I think. I was allowed to go home. And then that came back clear, mercifully clear. But the cancer in my eye still needed a bit more treatment. So I ended up having brachytherapy as well in the June. So they moved very quickly. So from the beginning of April, when I had my chirotherapy and sentinel lymph node, I was back in at the beginning of June, the 4th of June, having the brachytherapy and plaque, and that was 4 nights, 5 days. I had that as well, and since then I've been fine with my eye. My eye's clear. I have an annual check. They take photographs and keep an eye on things. Excuse the pun.
Yeah.
Just because obviously conjunctival can reoccur. It's quite common to reoccur. Mine hasn't so far, and that's me coming up to 7 years. But I never feel complacent. I always feel you never know. And I think you do have to be very vigilant with this disease and keep on top of it, really.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's a fantastic sort of like roundup of having that done. And I know, again, like there's so much to sort of cover, and so many people are obviously different. But having injections, when you mentioned about having the sentinel biopsy, that must be quite daunting.
Yeah, I was
hear
more
what they're
frightened.
obviously going to be doing.
Yeah, I was more frightened of the prospect of that, certainly, I think, than I was with anything. The thought of having an injection in your eye, and I was reading stuff about the blue dye, and that it might stay, etc. And also when you have the lymph nodes, because obviously they don't, I suppose the doctors do know where it's going to end up. They put a mark on my face here and one on my cheek here, and then I was worried about, what I was going to come out looking from the surgery, but, whether I was going to have marks on my face. But I mean, my surgery was amazing. There was no, I mean, the doctors, when they took my, my eye thing off and everything, they were like, wow, this looks so good, and yeah, it was very daunting having the injection, but I have to say it was done really well. I didn't feel a thing. I didn't even see the needle. They just did it so well. And I just thought afterwards, oh, how silly to be so worried about that, because it was just really, they knew what they were doing. Although, as I say, I think that was the first time they'd actually done the procedure. They're experts.
Wow.
They took really good care of me.
Wow, I think it's totally understandable, having that apprehensiveness, before you have a procedure done. So, brilliant to hear that it wasn't actually as bad as you'd imagined. That's good to hear.
I was going to say, I think my experience with having, all of the experiences during having this is that I think the imagination and what you imagine it to be is
Mm,
actually far worse than the reality. And sometimes not all of it's been wholly pleasant, but it's never been as bad as my imagination has led me to
yeah,
believe it's going to be. I think it's that fear and uncertainty, which is the hardest thing to deal with.
yeah. And then have you got, have you been able to talk to sort of other, because obviously conjunctival melanoma is more rare than, or less common than uveal melanomas. So have you
Uh-huh.
been able to sort of connect with other patients and talk to other people?
Yeah, there are a couple of us on the group, and our experiences are broadly similar. I think really we're in different centres, but there's a lot of commonality. I think as well there is a conjunctival group. It's the admin for that is an American lady, and there are quite a few of us from all around the world on that
Mm,
actually, because as you say, it is quite rare. So I suppose most of my contact has been with people in the States or Australia, but I don't compare the treatments because although we do share some treatments, I mean their scanning regimes, etc., are completely different to
mm,
what we have in the UK. And that, you're really comparing apples and pears sometimes if you compare yourself with
absolutely.
the American healthcare system. But it's been great from a support point of view, and just I think most of the stuff I've learned has been from other people, and although I've you know although I've as I say, there are a few of us on Ocumel. I think my friends who have uveal melanoma, I do class them as friends. I've met some amazing people, and we've been through the experience of brachytherapy. I mean, the hospital was so they were a bit worried actually. They made me go and come back and talk to one of the nurses because I was not blasé about having brachytherapy, but I didn't have a lot of questions because I knew people had had it.
Mm,
I'd actually just found out that my neck was clear, and that was the thing that I had been really apprehensive and frightened about finding out about. So
yeah.
when they said that that I needed to have the plaque, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's fine," and they were just a bit like, "Oh, that's not a normal reaction." Um, and it was purely because I had been more geared up about finding out about my neck results, which obviously would have been a bit of a game changer if cancer had been found there, and also because I knew about it. I didn't have
Mm,
questions. I knew what to expect. I've met people that have been through it, and so that was really reassuring. But I don't think it reassured my doctors at the time, actually.
it's hard, isn't it? I know, particularly sometimes when people call into the helpline, they can feel a bit worried if they're
Mhm.
coping or not coping, and it's just there's no right answer, is there? And it's just a case, actually, if you feel that talking it through will help, then it's good to do that early on, isn't it? But like yourself, obviously, you'd had more time to prepare. It probably did, hadn't come as such a big shock.
Yeah, I was a year into treatment, so that's very different as well. And I think you're right. Although our experiences are similar, we are all different, and how we
Mm,
deal with things is different. And it's you have to do what's right for you. And for me, it was reading everything, finding out everything I could, because I'm a need to know kind of person.
mhm,
Other people don't want to do that, not just with this cancer, but with other cancers as well. And I think you just have to do what's right for you. And I certainly did find some help via Maggie's locally. And it was. I think for me, it was because of the uncertainty during that year. It's easy looking back when you know what where the journey got to and what was the end point. But when you're in the middle of it, you don't know what the next step's going to be all the time.
mm,
And I know that they did certainly battle to get rid of the melanoma in my eyes. So yeah, I found speaking to Maggie's really helpful, and I only needed to go for a little while, but it was really good to go there and talk. And I think one of the mistakes I probably made looking back is that if anything, I tried to carry on too much as normal.
mm,
I was back at work within 2 weeks, I think, of having my sentinel
Wow.
lymph node. I was back at work within about a week and a half of having my brachytherapy, and I actually, I did push myself too hard to be too normal too quickly, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's very easy to do, isn't it? You just think, well, actually, yeah, it's a procedure. I've recovered physically, you know, as far as anything sort of external goes, and then try and get back into the groove of things. But you do
Yeah,
need to be kind to yourself as well, don't you?
I think that's one of the things that with eye cancer, I think because, um, the nature of it, you know, we do look normal. We do look as if we're not, you know, we don't look typically as if we're going through what we're going through. And
Mhm.
I think people expect you to be just normal as well and really well. And you know, and I think that's certainly to bear in mind as well, that you are going through something. It's not just a cold, and you're going to bounce back in a couple of days, kind of thing. It's and I think that's okay to acknowledge that, basically.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. It's yeah, it's hard. I think, when you see people that look ill through, whatever treatment that they've had, it's a different mindset, isn't it? It's just it's very difficult to get your head around. But yeah, just important to take time out for yourself and know what's right for you, which is hard to judge. But it's almost like we've geared you up to talk about Maggie's and to support, which we honestly haven't done. So yeah, just wanted to say thank you so much for coming today and obviously sharing everything with us. It's been incredible. I'm sure it will help a lot of people.
Okay,
So
thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Okay, bye bye.
Thanks, Lisa. Bye bye.